The afternoon sun beat down on the firing range at Camp Pendleton, where Staff Sergeant Maria Torres adjusted her rifle scope with practiced precision. At 32, she had spent 12 years in the Marine Corps, including 3 tours overseas as a sniper. Her record spoke for itself. 200 confirmed kills, countless lives saved, and a chest full of commendations that she never wore unless required. But today, she wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the young corporal 2 lanes down who kept glancing at her exposed forearm, where a detailed tattoo of a coiled snake wrapped around a combat knife ran from her wrist to her elbow. "Hey, check out the ink on the lady," the corporal muttered to his buddy, loud enough for Maria to hear. Maria said nothing. She'd heard worse, much worse. The thing about being a woman in the military, especially in combat roles, was that you learned early on which battles to fight and which to let slide. Some days you had the energy to educate, other days you just wanted to do your job and go home. Today was a go-home kind of day. She fired 3 rounds in quick succession. All 3 hit dead center at 800 yards. She ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and packed up her gear without acknowledging the whispers behind her. The parking lot was half empty when she reached her truck. The California heat made the asphalt shimmer, and she was looking forward to a cold beer and silence when she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to find a young lieutenant she didn't recognize. He looked fresh out of officer training, with pressed utilities and boots so shiny she could see her reflection. "That's me," she said, tossing her gear bag into the truck bed. "Lieutenant Peter Chen, ma'am. I'm organizing the quarterly training exercise next month." Maria studied him for a moment. He seemed sincere, which was refreshing. "Joint operations scenario. We've got Marines, Navy, and some Army personnel participating. The brass wants to test our inter-service coordination. The best we have, ma'am." Maria almost smiled at that. Reputation was a funny thing. To some, she was one of the finest snipers in the Corps. To others, she was just a woman with a tattoo trying to play soldier. "I'll think about it," she said. "Yes, ma'am." As she drove off base, Maria let her mind wander to the tattoo that seemed to bother so many people. She'd gotten it 8 years ago, during her second tour in Afghanistan. The snake represented patience, the endless hours of waiting that defined a sniper's life. The knife represented the swift, decisive action that came after all that patience. Her spotter that tour, Corporal Danny Wright, had designed it. He'd been a talented artist before joining up, and during their downtime, he'd sketch in a battered notebook. When Maria mentioned wanting a tattoo that meant something, Danny had stayed up all night drawing designs. "This one," he'd said, showing her the coiled snake, "you wait like this, perfectly still, perfectly patient, and when the moment comes, you strike clean and true. That's you, Torres." 3 weeks later, Danny was killed by an IED. Maria had been 300 yards away, positioned on a rooftop, unable to do anything but watch through her scope as the explosion tore through the convoy below. She got the tattoo during her next leave, a reminder of Danny, of patience, of purpose. The following weeks passed in their usual rhythm. Maria taught basic marksmanship classes, qualified on various weapon systems, and tried to avoid the social politics that infected every military installation. She kept to herself, ate lunch alone, and focused on her work. But word had spread about Lieutenant Chen's training exercise, and Maria's name kept coming up. Apparently, the Navy was sending some of their special operations personnel, and the Marine brass wanted to make sure their instructors were top-notch. Asked Gunnery Sergeant Frank Murphy one afternoon in the armory. Frank was one of the few people on base Maria genuinely liked, a straight shooter who'd served with her brother in Iraq. "The training op, Chen's exercise." Maria shrugged. "Well, decide faster." That made Maria look up. "Requested me? Beats me. Maybe he heard about that shot you made in Helmand." Frank grinned. "Nothing stays secret forever, kid." Maria felt her jaw tighten. That mission was classified, or at least it was supposed to be. She'd been attached to a SEAL team for a week, providing overwatch during a high-value target operation. When things went sideways and the team was pinned down, Maria had taken out the enemy machine gunner from a distance most people thought was impossible. "How?" she asked quietly. Nobody talked, but people notice things. People remember. That night, Maria lay in her small base apartment staring at the ceiling. She didn't like being noticed. Being noticed meant standing out, and standing out meant inviting scrutiny, judgment, and all the garbage that came with being different. But she also knew that refusing the assignment would look like cowardice. And whatever else people might say about Maria Torres, nobody could call her a coward. The next morning, she sent Lieutenant Chen an email. 3 words: "I'm in." His response came within minutes, full of exclamation points and gratitude. Maria deleted it without reading the whole thing and went to the range to clear her head. She was zeroing a new rifle when she heard voices behind her. "That's her," someone said. "Looks like she's trying too hard," another voice replied. Maria's finger tightened on the trigger. She breathed out slowly, focused on the target 600 yards away, and fired. Perfect center mass. "Trying too hard," she muttered to herself. The day of the training exercise arrived with a cloudless sky and temperatures already climbing by 7 in the morning. Maria arrived at the staging area early, as was her habit. She liked to survey the terrain, plan her positions, and mentally prepare before anyone else showed up. The mock urban environment sprawled across 15 acres, a collection of plywood buildings, concrete barriers, and shipping containers arranged to simulate a Middle Eastern village. It was as close to the real thing as training could get. Lieutenant Chen jogged over, clipboard in hand, looking nervous. "Sergeant Torres, glad you're here. The SEAL team arrived an hour ago." 8 operators, plus their commander, Commander Jack Sullivan, former Team 6 apparently. Maria nodded. She'd heard the name before, though she couldn't place where. "You'll be positioned on the water tower," Chen said, pointing to a metal structure on the eastern edge of the compound. "Your job is to provide overwatch and engage any hostile targets that threaten the rescue team. Simulated rounds only, obviously. You'll be using the modified training rifle with the laser designation system. When you hit a target, their vest will register it." Maria had done dozens of these exercises. They were valuable training, but they always felt sterile compared to the real thing. No adrenaline, no fear, no consequences. Still, she treated them seriously. Training like you fight meant fighting like you trained. She climbed the water tower and set up her position. From this height, she had a clear view of the entire compound. She could see the Marines moving into position, the role players being herded into the central building, and in the distance, the SEAL team conducting their final equipment checks. Through her scope, she watched them work. They moved with the fluid efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times. Their gear was pristine, their weapons personalized with custom modifications. These weren't weekend warriors, these were professionals. Then she saw him, the commander Chen had mentioned. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with graying hair at his temples and the bearing of someone who'd earned every bit of authority he carried. He was pointing at a map, directing his team, his movements economical and precise. Something about him seemed familiar. The radio crackled. "All stations, this is Control. Exercise begins in 5 minutes." Maria settled into her position, adjusting her body until she was perfectly comfortable. Sniping was about stillness, about becoming part of the landscape. Your breath, your heartbeat, even your thoughts had to slow down. She watched through her scope as the exercise began. The SEAL team moved in, using cover and concealment like it was second nature. They communicated through hand signals, advancing on the target building with textbook precision. Then one of the Marines playing a hostile appeared in a window, his training rifle aimed at the SEAL point man. Maria's finger tightened on the trigger. She led the target slightly, accounting for wind and distance, and fired. The laser hit the Marine's vest, and his sensor beeped. "Good shot, unknown sniper," came a voice over the radio. She recognized it as Commander Sullivan's. The exercise continued. Maria took out 3 more hostiles, each shot clean and precise. The SEAL team breached the building, secured the hostages, and began their extraction. That's when things went wrong. One of the role players, a young woman playing a hostage, suddenly stumbled. Maria saw it through her scope. The woman's ankle twisted, and she went down hard. The SEAL team was already moving, focused on the exit route, and hadn't noticed. But Maria noticed. And she saw what else was happening. 2 Marines playing hostiles were circling around, about to flank the exposed woman. Maria made a split-second decision. She fired twice in rapid succession, hitting both Marines. Their vests beeped, and they stopped, confused about who'd shot them. "Hold position," Maria said into the radio. "Injured civilian at your 6 o'clock." There was a pause. Then Commander Sullivan's voice. "Copy that." "Overwatch." "Roger." The exercise paused while medics checked the role player. Turned out she'd actually sprained her ankle, not just simulated an injury. As they helped her off the field, Maria watched Commander Sullivan scan the area until his gaze landed on the water tower. He stared up at her position for a long moment, and even from this distance, Maria could see him tilt his head slightly, as if trying to figure something out. The exercise resumed and concluded without further incident. The SEAL team successfully extracted all hostages, and Control called an end to the scenario. Maria broke down her position and climbed down from the water tower. Her knees ached. She'd been still for almost 2 hours. But she moved smoothly, years of practice making the discomfort invisible. She was loading her gear into her truck when she heard boots on gravel behind her. Maria turned to find Commander Sullivan standing a few feet away. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the weathered skin of someone who'd spent years in the sun and sand. His name tape read Sullivan in black letters. "Just doing my job, sir," she said. That shot at 800 meters, moving target, accounting for the injured civilian, that wasn't just doing your job. Maria nodded, unsure where this was going. Sullivan stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Have we met before?" But even as she said it, a memory surfaced. Afghanistan, 5 years ago. A desperate firefight, a SEAL team trapped, and Maria on a rooftop, firing shot after shot to keep them alive. She'd been wearing a balaclava that day, her face covered against the dust and sun. She'd never seen the SEAL commander she was protecting, but he'd been there. He'd been one of them. Sullivan's gaze dropped to her exposed forearm, to the coiled snake tattoo. His eyes widened slightly. "The tattoo," he said. Maria's heart began to pound. "Helmand Province, 5 years ago. My team was pinned down in a compound. We had a sniper providing overwatch, but we never saw their face, just a shadow on a rooftop. But I remember seeing an arm reach out to adjust the rifle." The memory came flooding back, the desperate radio calls, the sound of gunfire, the weight of her rifle as she fired again and again. She'd killed 11 enemy fighters that day, buying the SEAL team enough time to call in air support. "That was you," Sullivan said, and it wasn't a question. Maria didn't know what to say. She'd filed her report, been thanked by her command, and moved on. She'd never thought about the men she'd saved, never wondered what happened to them. "I tried to find out who you were," Sullivan continued, "but the reports were vague. No name, no unit, nothing. I wanted to thank you, to shake your hand." "I got reassigned," Maria said simply. Sullivan extended his hand. "Commander Jack Sullivan, and I owe you my life." Maria shook his hand. His grip was firm, respectful. "No," Sullivan said firmly. "What you did that day went beyond duty. You stayed on that rooftop for 6 hours, in 110-degree heat, taking fire, never missing a shot. That's not just skill." Maria felt something shift inside her. For 5 years, she'd carried that day like a weight, wondering if she'd done enough, second-guessing every decision. But hearing it from someone who'd been there, who understood, it meant something. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. Sullivan smiled. "No." Word spread fast. By the next morning, everyone on base seemed to know that the woman with the snake tattoo had saved a SEAL commander's life in Afghanistan. The young corporal who'd mocked her on the firing range avoided her eyes in the hallway. Officers who'd barely acknowledged her before nodded respectfully when they passed. But Maria found all the attention uncomfortable. She'd never wanted recognition. She joined the Marines to serve, to protect, to do something that mattered. The medals and commendations were nice, but they weren't why she did the job. What bothered her more was what she overheard in the mess hall 2 days after the exercise. "I still don't buy it," someone was saying. "SEALs stick together." Yeah, I heard she probably exaggerated what happened. How would she even make shots like that? Maria set down her coffee cup carefully. She could feel that old familiar anger rising, the kind that made her want to prove herself, to show them exactly what she was capable of. But she'd learned long ago that proving yourself to people who didn't want to believe you was exhausting and pointless. The people who mattered, her commanders, her fellow Marines who'd served with her, they knew the truth. Everyone else was just noise. She was walking back to her office when Lieutenant Chen caught up with her, slightly out of breath. "Commander Sullivan wants to speak with you." Maria's stomach tightened. "No, ma'am." "But he—" She found Sullivan in the conference room with another man she didn't recognize, an older gentleman in civilian clothes with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Sergeant Torres, thank you for coming," Sullivan said. "This is Dr. Richard Hayes." Maria immediately felt defensive. "I understand," Dr. Hayes said gently, "and that's not why I'm here. Commander Sullivan contacted me because he wanted to verify your service record for Helmand Province." Sullivan leaned forward. "For the last 5 years, I've been trying to find you, not just to thank you, but because what you did deserves recognition, real recognition. With all due respect, sir, I don't need—" "This isn't about what you need," Sullivan interrupted. "It's about what's right. There are people out there, including people on this base, who don't believe women belong in combat roles, who think female soldiers are inferior, or weak, or playing dress-up." Maria felt her throat tighten. "Not anymore," Dr. Hayes said, pulling out a document. "I've been granted clearance to discuss the essential facts," Maria asked. Sullivan stood up and walked to the window. "After you saved us that day, I went home to my wife and daughters. My oldest was 12 at the time, smart as a whip, tough as nails, and she wanted to join the military when she grew up. But she was scared." He turned back to Maria. "I told her about the sniper on the rooftop, the one who stayed calm under fire, who never missed, who saved 15 men without hesitation. I told her that courage doesn't have a gender, that skill doesn't have a gender." Maria felt tears threatening and forced them back. Sullivan smiled. "She's at Annapolis right now, first year, and she carries a picture of a snake tattoo in her wallet. I took it off a website about military tattoos." The weight of that settled over Maria like a blanket. She'd spent so many years trying to be invisible, to just do her job without drawing attention. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe her visibility mattered to people she'd never meet. She asked, finally. Dr. Hayes opened his folder. "Just your permission to tell your story." Over the next week, Maria sat for several interviews. Dr. Hayes was true to his word. He never sensationalized, never exaggerated. He simply documented what happened, using her testimony and Sullivan's to piece together an accurate account. The hardest part was talking about Danny Wright, the corporal who designed her tattoo. She'd never really processed his death, had just pushed it down and moved forward like she'd been trained to do. "He sounds like he was a good friend," Dr. Hayes said gently. "He was the best," Maria said. "He taught me that patience and action aren't opposites, that you can be both gentle and deadly, both thoughtful and decisive. That's what the tattoo means. It's not about looking tough." When Dr. Hayes left, Maria felt lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a burden she didn't know was there, and someone had helped her set it down. The story was published 3 months later in a prominent military journal. Dr. Hayes had woven together Maria's account, Sullivan's testimony, and additional research into a powerful narrative about courage, skill, and perseverance. The response was overwhelming. Maria received letters from young women considering military service, from parents whose daughters were in the armed forces, and veterans who wanted to share their own stories. But the letter that mattered most came from Sullivan's daughter, Emily. "Dear Sergeant Torres," it read, "My dad told me you're the sniper with the snake tattoo. I've been carrying a picture of that tattoo for 5 years, not knowing it was yours. When I feel like I don't belong here, when the guys in my class make comments or jokes, I look at that picture. I think about you on that rooftop, staying calm, doing your job, saving lives. I think about how you didn't quit, how you didn't let anyone tell you that you couldn't do it. Thank you for showing me what's possible. Thank you for being brave. Maria read that letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in her desk drawer next to her old photograph of Danny Wright. That afternoon, she went back to the firing range. The same young corporal was there, the one who'd mocked her tattoo months ago. He saw her coming and straightened up, looking uncertain. "Sergeant Torres, he started. "Save it," Maria said, not unkindly. He nodded. "Don't apologize to me, just learn from it. Judge people by their actions, not their appearance." Maria set up at her usual lane and began shooting. After a few minutes, she noticed the corporal had moved closer, watching her technique. "Sergeant," he said hesitantly, "how do you do it? Stay so calm, everyone's been talking about what happened in Afghanistan." Maria lowered her rifle and looked at him. He was young, maybe 22, with eyes that still held some innocence. She remembered being that young, that uncertain. "Was she?" she asked. "I was terrified. Every single second of that day, I was scared. My hands shook, my heart pounded." The corporal looked shocked. "I stayed because those men needed me. Because fear doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're human. Courage isn't about not feeling afraid." She picked up her rifle again. "Now stop bothering me and get back to your own lane. And for God's sake, fix your breathing technique." The corporal grinned. "Sir." As the sun began to set over Camp Pendleton, Maria fired her last rounds of the day. Each shot was perfect, centered, true. She'd spent 12 years learning to be patient, to be precise, to be deadly when necessary, and gentle when possible. The snake on her forearm seemed to shimmer in the fading light. A reminder of Danny, of patience, of purpose. A symbol that had drawn mockery and judgment, but had ultimately become something bigger than herself. She packed up her gear and headed home, knowing that somewhere out there, young women were looking at pictures of that tattoo and finding courage. Somewhere, Emily Sullivan was studying at Annapolis, working hard, proving she belonged. Somewhere, the next generation of warriors, male and female, were learning that strength came in many forms. And somewhere on a rooftop in Helmand Province, 5 years in the past, a younger version of Maria Torres was settling into position, steadying her breath, and preparing to save 15 lives. The snake coiled and ready to strike. Patient, purposeful, perfect. The end.